Switch. There it goes. Alrighty. It was Monday. Had an insanely long weekend waiting to get back on the road. Driving, doing this job, and not having a load over the weekend blows, especially when you're in an environment that's extremely hot, such as Tennessee. But anyway, I got a load here. I just picked up this is Maryville, Tennessee, and I'm going to Liberty, Ohio. 3 little pallets. They were able to stack them up. They weigh 700 pounds, so not that big of a deal. And I am now trying to get back on the highway. They're doing all kinds of construction around here for some reason. It has the road blocked off, and it's like flaggers, but no one's moving, nothing's going anywhere. So I had to drive down here to the end and try a different route, trying to get back to I-40. It's been a long day. And random topics that pop into my head while I'm driving around. I flew out in the Gulf of Mexico for 14 years. I got to see it from one side to the other. All weather, all conditions, different companies. There was a lot of buyouts going on. So you got to kind of roll with the punches with that. And the Gulf is huge, yet somehow you always bump into the same people. You around a corner and ta-da! I remember you. Wayne, that's one name. Always bumped into Wayne. Alright, this is 55, I'm going 53 already. So, the topic today that I was going to babble about was fishing. If you're into fishing, if you've never done saltwater fishing, you are missing out, because once you've done offshore saltwater fishing, you'll never be able to fish in a stream or a lake ever again. Basically, the only thing you catch in a lake is bait. Because offshore, it's a whole different can of worms, and the gear that you use, you can't even buy unless you're close to saltwater. Because where I live is about 100 miles away. There's no saltwater, therefore there's no saltwater gear for sale. But generally speaking, when you work offshore, you have these platforms that sit on like pylons, and there's all kinds of legs and framework down there. And over time, barnacles and aquatic life attach themselves to the legs, and that attachment brings more, and that brings more, and that, hold on a second, this isn't right. And that brings more, then you have fish. So everybody who works out there has the opportunity to fish, and people come offshore on the weekends usually, and they go fishing. And they catch some serious stuff. Different kinds of, it's been so many years now, but red snapper seems to be the #1 target of the people who fish. And you'll have snapper holes, and you'll have times of the day when they're hitting and times of the day when they're not. But a couple of things that stand out. Shallow water, I think it's, if memory serves, up to 3 miles out is considered state water, and it's under a different set of rules than the deep water guys. And the state water platforms are more likely, don't you change lanes on me, you're lucky, are more likely to experience weekend fishermen who come out. And the platforms are usually older, because when they started to drop gas wells in the Gulf, obviously they started close and worked their way out. So on the weekends you see various boats out there, as long as the weather was nice. And there was this one weekend, beautiful sunny day, glassy smooth sea, which is very unusual, but it was perfectly flat, beautiful sun, wonderful day, and a family came out in a little tiny day cruiser. Mom, dad, son, daughter. The kid was maybe 7 or 8. I think the daughter was 12 or 13, somewhere in there. And they're all fishing on all 3 sides, 3 or 4 sides. They're all in the water. Well, the daughter, who was about this big around, catches something, and everything you catch out there is big. And she starts cranking on this reel. She's got a fish on, and she's fighting, and we're watching. Everybody's kind of, watching. And as she struggles more and more people on the platform are coming over to watch this girl fight with this fish. And she's trying to hand the fishing pole to her dad, and her dad's not having any of it. He goes, "No, this is all you." And he keeps handing the fishing pole back to her, and she's trying to pass it off. And then she's struggling, and she just wants to give up. At which point, 8 or 10 different guys on the platform, who they don't know is up there, we all start barking at her. You better reel that fish. Guy in the other goes, we all start barking at her, and the dad looks up and gets this huge grin on his face. And the girl looks up, and she starts fighting and wrestling, and she's sweating, and you pull up and you reel down, you pull up, it's real heavy. And finally gets it up to the surface. I don't remember what it was, how big of a fish, but it was big enough that it was kicking her butt. She got out of the water. And of course, we all had to hoot and holler and make a big stink out of her, because that's the chance you get to embarrass somebody. And she was proud of herself, and the dad kind of looked up and went, because that's what dads are supposed to do. And that event stood out in my mind. Now, when you're out there, when you're working, you obviously don't go fishing during the day, unless you happen to be a helicopter pilot and you have nothing to do all day. But in the evenings, when all the work is done, guys will go out and fish, and they come up with some pretty ingenious ways of doing it. You've got 100-kilo test line with 10 hooks on it attached to an electric reel. I mean, they're trying to turn it into I'm sorry, I gotta get on some glasses here. There's words coming up, I can't read them. Maybe get some reading glasses or something for here. You're the only one here. Not anymore, you're not. Trinity, we're talking about fish in the Gulf of Mexico. That's the topic. The Gulf of America. The Gulf, let's just call it the Gulf. And you get a certain time of the day, the fish start biting in, so we'll start reeling them in. There's always one guy that knows how to fillet really, really well, and then you'll have 3 or 4 other people just yanking these fish out of the water. Now, the rules are, if you fish offshore and you come back, you've got to bring the whole fish, because there's limits. It's got to be a certain size. You can only have so many, so you've got to bring the whole fish in by law. But if you're working offshore and you're out there for a week or 2 and you're going back and forth by helicopter, you only have so much square footage in that aircraft. You can only carry so much weight, and carrying a bunch of fish is kind of ridiculous. So the crews out there will fillet the fish up and freeze it and wrap it up. They use newspaper. Since newspapers are kind of faded away, I don't know what they use anymore. But at the time, we used newspaper, and you just fillet it and wrap it, fillet it, wrap it. And at the end of your hitch, a week or 2 in, we go to the beach, we bring in the frozen bags, and everybody would just split it up and get an even cut. A pretty regular routine. The problem is, Fish and Game were not real happy when we did that. And they would show up on crew change day at the heliport, and they would start going through and checking to see who had what, and I don't know what the legal ramifications are. It would cause a problem if you got caught with previously filleted fish while you're landing. So, in a helicopter, flying out there especially, you will have 2 and sometimes 3 radios in your aircraft. The one is for company frequency, when you're talking back and forth to our own dispatchers and whatnot. Another frequency is for local traffic when you beach in and beach out. And then there's a 3rd channel, a 3rd radio you have available that is kind of a BS frequency that everybody and their brother uses. And they call it the fingers or the numbers, depending on where you are. The radio frequency is 123.45, so fingers. So if you're talking to somebody, or you need to talk to somebody on a company freak, and you don't want to hog it up with a conversation, or you don't want the company hearing it, you say, hey, Bob, on numbers, and then you jump over it and you have a conversation. And on a side note, when you say that, everybody and their brother goes over there and listens to the conversation. So sometimes you have a fake conversation with someone if you're just bored. You would say, hey, you heard so-and-so's getting fired? And you go, really? I thought he was going to get indicted and go to jail. Well, we'll find out Monday. And then later everybody goes, who are you talking about? It's kind of a little side game you play. But anyway, we're doing a crew change, which means I get 3, it depends on the aircraft. You pick up 3 or 4 people, you fly out, they slap high fives, you pick up the guys that are offshore, you bring them in, so the platform's never unmanned. So I'm flying in, and on the BS frequency, somebody says Fish and Game's at the heliport, checking the heliport. So okay, we're going to have to do something with that. Everybody's got fish in their bags. So the heliport is not on the beach proper. The heliport is about 2 miles inland. So coming in, there was this line of trees, and between the line of trees was a dirt road. So we're going to do some of that Miami Vice stuff, and we're going to land and unload our cargo. So these guys actually brought their stuff in a cooler this time because they could hold the cooler in their lap. They had space for it. And great traffic stop. And we set the cooler down, and then we take off and we fly in and land. And of course, Fishin' Game comes out and goes rifling around and stuff. Then we go out with my next load of guys, and I tell them same thing. We got Fishin' Game. They're digging through people's stuff. They go, okay, and I come back and I shoot for that same place, and I land again. The cooler we dropped off is now gone because the guys came and picked it up. But there's 3 more coolers in the ditch. So we ain't the only people doing this. Surprise! And that was just kind of how we did it. I can't tell you what base that was, but that's pretty common tactic to get fish in. Okay. Was it Miami Vice live? Gotta hide the stash. Another thing I learned about, and this was out of Louisiana, they have a fish. Let me check here again, sorry. I don't have a pair of cheaters. I really should, but I don't. Yeah. We're still talking about fish. And in Louisiana, along the coast, they have a type of fish called a pogie. And a pogie fish is about this big around and maybe a foot and a half, 2 feet long. And there's nothing you can do with them. You can't eat them. You can't clean them. And they are as slimy as any fish can be. So what they use them for is oil. Apparently you catch them in nets in mass and you put them in a vise, basically, and you squeeze them. And when they're done squeezing, the only thing left of the fish is dust. I mean, there's nothing to it. It's an oil for different products. I think perfumes might be one of them. The pogie fish swim in a pack, and you can see them. They're under the water. They're reflective and silvery. And the boats that go out and get them are not very large, and they have little ramps on the back and have 2 smaller boats. So they go out and to circle the fish, and they have airplanes that take off. Now these big boats or small boats have numbers on top of them, and these airplanes used to take off right there by the beach. These little single-engine planes, and they were fish spotters or pogie planes, as I refer to them as. And they would call down to the boats and say, "Go over here," and the little boats would go out to where the water was all shut, and they would drive their boats around it with a net, and they could pull the net tight. And then they drag it back to the boat, and then they start to reel the net back in. Well, they don't have the hoist strength to drag this huge net out of the water. They would literally put a vacuum hose into the bag as they're shrinking it, and it was blowing the water out the other side, but capturing the fish. And I was like, that's kind of an ingenious system. So they would suck up all this fish into this hole, and they take it into the beach, and the pogie plant, as we call it, when they process it, was right there by the beach. The boats parked there, the people work local, and that's a regular business, and it's all up and down the Louisiana coast. From what I have been told, the plant, you can smell it from miles away when you're flying. You just, oh geez, you're coming to, they were in production. But from what I am told, the people who work there, they smell like pogie. Their houses, their cars, everything. It's a smell you just don't get rid of, that oily fish smell. Didn't like that. And as far as kind of an offbeat of fishing, in the oil and gas industry, people look at that and, oh my God, these companies are making zillions of dollars. Well, there's a lot of money to be made in the oil and gas industry, but as I stood back, and I've never been in that part of it, I was just in transportation, kind of watching how it works. What happens in the Gulf, we talk about gas leases, is a company tows the survey gear, and it does all its whatever, and it bounces off the bottom of the ocean, and it comes back with a report saying, there's a vein here, there's gas here, there's something there, and it kind of gives them something to look at. The government gets a copy of the report for free. Investment companies that do drilling have to pay for it, and then they bid on a lease. And the U.S. government says, you can have this lease for 20 years. We think you're going to put this many wells on it, so we're going to charge you for 20 years of production up front, And we estimate, since you're going to put 3 wells, we're going to charge you for tearing the place down 20 years from now in advance. So you're putting up all this money up front. And eventually, they get the lease, they go into this block, which is 3 miles square, and they spend the time, money, and energy to drill wells, and then they got to put the structure up. And maybe it's a moneymaker, maybe it's not, but it takes a while, and it's very, very expensive to get it rolling. And once it's up and rolling, and it produces gas, let's say, gas, oil, and another thing called condensate comes out of it. And they run this thing for, I'm just making up numbers, 17 years, and all of a sudden the production starts to go down. They put it on a loop, and they stop at it every 3 days, they check it, and then the production goes down more, and it becomes to a point where the well is no longer profitable, and that's when they tear it out of the water. They say, all right, this well's dead, we're going to get rid of it. Which is, again, you paid for that. What is my phone keep moving? You pay for it up front. And that's where I got to go out a couple times on the demolition crew, back to fishing. They have buildings all over. They call them a skid. It's a production unit. Buildings all over the place. Well, they come in with a crew and a barge and a huge crane. And they unhook all these big, it's welded on. They cut all the buildings off. And they cut all the equipment off. And then they take the structure above the water line off, put on a barge and leave. And they reuse the structure. And I've been on a structure over here, and then a couple years later, I'm 300 miles over there, and I'm walking around on a structure going, man, I've been here before. And you start realizing it's the same structure turned in a different location. And then you have the framework, the scaffolding that goes down to the ocean floor. And the last thing they do after they've capped the wells and pulled the well out and done everything they can do is to take that structure out. And how they remove it from the ocean floor is they put explosives around. They send a dive team down, they wrap explosives around the legs. And my job at the time was to do what's called turtle watch, where you literally circle the platform for like 20 minutes at a quarter mile, and then for another 20 minutes you got to go out a half mile. They've got a GPS to know exactly how far out you were, and then they say, okay, we haven't seen any sea turtles, and then they detonate. They go boom, and they detonate the leg. You see water come up, and I saw flames come out of one of the legs. I was like, cool. And then all the fish that were in the general vicinity come to the surface. And the boats go running around out there, and they're just grabbing his stuff as fast as they can, because the fish are either dead or stunned, but a whole bunch of fish of all sizes, shapes, and colors come bubbling to the surface. Then I got kind of a kick out of it, because they're out there with gaffs and little boats, and they got their sticks, they're ready. Here they come. It's like dynamite fishing, but on a bigger scale. Well, that's my 2 cents on offshore fishing. If you haven't tried it, I recommend it. You know, you go fishing, get your little brook trout, that's cute, but you fish in saltwater, it's a whole different. I lived on a platform out there for a couple of years. We worked out there 14 on, 14 off, and we had a hand crank, a big old wheel with a crank, and it had 100 kilo, that's 220 pound test line attached to a steel cable. The last 6 feet it was a steel cable, and it had a treble hook, big old treble hook. And halfway up the cable we had to put a little metal plate to sink it. And we put a Cornish aim pin on there, threw that over the side, 700 feet of water, kind of pull, and it got hit. We started cranking, got about 10 seconds into the crank, and it broke free. And we pulled it up, and the steel cable had snapped. And it wasn't a light cable. I could hang from it, and it wouldn't have broke. But whatever pulled on it. Surprise! So we're like, something big moving around down there. And we had a crew come out to that same plant. It was Green Canyon, I think the name of it was. We had a crew come out. They were doing some kind of maintenance. And they had commercial divers. They've been putting it down. And one of the divers came up, and he's using it for gang signs. And the guy hands him this metal mesh bag that looked like a body bag, some mesh body bag, and he hands it to him, he disappears, and he comes back up with a hook, and he goes back under, and this basket is chucking full of spiny lobster. I mean, as full as you can fit. It was, think of a box that a refrigerator comes to your house in, and get shipped. That's how many square footage of solid spiny lobster, big spiny lobster. And the crew came up on the platform that evening, and we had a cook, and the cook said, legally I can't cook this because it's wild caught, which is some of the rules they have. He goes, but I can set up if somebody else wants to do the actual work. So they had a pot that would have been a cannibal's dream. It was a big old massive pot, and they set up a gas burner, went out and boiled water, and threw these Godzilla-sized lobster into this pot, and it was absolutely wonderful. And sometimes in life you will eat a food that is so tasty, you say to yourself, man, I hope this never ends. We had so much lobster, and we were ready for it to end by the time we were done, because you just so much of it. And the cook gave the kind of speak. Legally couldn't touch it, but he helped out. And everybody, there was probably 30 people between the workers and ourselves on the platform. And we inhaled and stuff like that. That was pretty awesome. That's about all I got for the topic of fishing for today. Nothing. I am pulling into. What am I pulling into? That way is Nashville, and that way is Lexington. I'm going to Lexington. All right. I'm just following the signs up here. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to spin this around. See what I do. How come you don't spin? There we go. This looks good on here, but apparently it looks a little rougher when we're moving because I'm not driving too fast though. I am somewhere between Chattanooga and where am I? Chattanooga and Nashville, I think, in this particular spot. Going northbound. Oop, gotta be over one. Oh, I'm in the right lane. World of expediting, if you can either be in a really nice place, cool, comfortable place to spend the weekend, you're all right. But being in a hot, sticky place kind of blows. And last night was hot and sticky, and that was no fun. Okay, I'm going 275 Lexington North, right there. I hear you. Again, there we go. Lovely roads we're having today. Oh yeah, lovely roads. As soon as I get past this truck, I am moving over. starting to notice no rush hour being present, how many places you go where the traffic just goes stop and go. Where I live, all of a sudden it's turned into stop. Wife and I have a vacation coming up. We are very excited about. We're going on a train ride. Yeah. I got you. We're going on a train ride across the United States. We'll post it here later this month. We're only, what is today? Yeah, well, the train leaves in 9 days. Wow. Yeah, we're both excited about this. Other than playing on a train a couple of times while in the Army, I've never really gone on a train trip. And I know the wife is excited about it. Did a live stream from that museum yesterday, and that turned out to be a disaster as far as I can tell. I think they had some kind of interrupters or something in the building, because I went back and watched what went out, not what I'm looking at, but what the people on your end are looking at, and the video looked like garbage. I'm like, oh great. I guess this live stream stuff is more needed when you're sitting still, I guess. But this is what I do all day as I drive. Okay, dude, pass me or don't pass me? Okay, he's in the don't pass me category. Pallet's falling off, dude. Pallet's falling off. Lexington North. Why am I thinking about food all of a sudden? Oh, it is 12:40. Heading towards Liberty, Ohio, in case you're wondering. Well, that was my topic of today, was fishing. I'll come up with something else. I still need to learn how to make music work on here.